Oh, this video is covering completing section 2D wireless revenues, or basically, this is where cellular companies will be entering their revenues. And this is the annual questionnaire. I'm using the all-purpose test utility, which is a fictitious utility that we use for testing and, of course, for videos like this. Uh, More information on this is in the FAQ, and you can almost get to the FAQ clicking this. So, start off, we are in section 2D, and the first one is one of the major sections. This is voice revenues. It includes traditional voice. It includes the portion of the voice portion of bundled services. So if you are offering uh, basic cellular service that includes voice, video, and data, and text messages and so forth, all as part of a bundled service, then you split out the voice portion for that. And these revenues are also allocated between intrastate and interstate. Only the intrastate section portion is accessible for USF. Because that's the way the rules are written, that's why we have to do the jurisdictional split as well. Now, explanations on how to do these are in the FAQ. And this is the FAQ again from the contact button on the left. You go to section 2D, there's talks generally about reporting, and then you get into the specifics. 2D1, you're reporting the voice portion of bundled service revenues. The rest of bundled service revenues winds up on line 2D10. So we're splitting voice here, rest on 2D10. The jurisdictional allocation between intrastate and interstate, basically anything the FCC has said, any option the FCC has approved to do this type of split is usable. The voice allocation, the commission has been more specific about, and they said that you had to follow the following hierarchy. So if number one applies, use that. If not, then there's a number 2, number 3, and number 4. For this one, I'm going to assume that the all-purpose test utility, that in terms of 80% of the communication traffic volume, in this case, packets or bits, that almost 90% of that is data and streaming video and so forth, and only 10% of those bits are related to voice traffic. Since it's greater than 80%, 100% is assigned to non-voice. 0 is assigned here. So of my bundled service revenue, 100% is going to line up in line 2D10, 0 here. If you want an example of a different type of split, one of the other splits, in the instructional video on section 2C, it covers splitting revenue and uses one of the, I think it uses option 3 or 4. And so in this case, my revenues here are just the revenues from the very small portion. Well, we don't have any pure voice customers, but the very small portion of revenues where customers are buying additional minutes they're on prepaid packages, and they're buying additional voice minutes. And those revenues are split between intrastate and interstate. Next, roaming charges. We have very minimal roaming charges. And so we entered those revenues split between interstate and intrastate. The all-purpose test utility does not charge a differential rate for long distance. Basically, all voice is voice. There's no long distance charges, so there's no separate long distance revenue. So we enter 0. You can't leave a line blank. The system will ask for an answer, but 0 is always an appropriate answer. Same with directory assistance. Early termination revenues, again, I've entered a small number here. It's also allocated between interstate and intrastate. If you're charging wholesale voice revenues or wholesale voice roaming charges, then you would enter an amount here. Doesn't have to be separated because this is not accessible for USF. And in this case, I'm assuming that the all-purpose test utility has no affiliates. We also do no wholesale or have no wholesale or MVNO customers at this time. And again, no affiliates. Okay. Now, line 9 is a series of accessible voice services. So other than traditional voice, we're talking things like paging and so forth. And then disbursements from the Lifeline program or high cost assistance. And again, if you call up the FAQ and you go down to line 9, here's line 9, and it talks about text messaging, paging, voicemail, reciprocom, those type of things get entered here in addition to state and federal Lifeline and link up reimbursement. So if you're participating in the Lifeline and link up programs and you're reimbursed by either the state or the feds, the total of that amount is entered on this line. Likewise, if you're receiving high cost assistance, if you're a participant in ACAM or receiving ACAM payments or RDOF payments, those would also be reported here. If you're a company that is providing both voice or both wireline and wireless revenues and you're receiving ACAM revenues, report them either under wireline or wireless as appropriate. Don't report them both places or it'll get double counted. So that's the accessible revenues. And then line D10 is mobile broadband, including the portion of bundled service revenues that is not voice. So if you're charging, say, $80 per month, and for a service that includes voice, video, data, and other nice things, and you end up saying 25% of that is voice, then $20 will be in line 1, and $80 of that revenue of that sale will be in this line. In this case, 100% is winding up on line D10 because we're using the 80-20 rule. It's more than 80% non-voice, so the entire revenue from bundled service is in here in non-voice. And then this also includes things like handset sales and ringtones and miscellaneous other stuff. But the biggest part here is going to be mobile broadband. And if you look, we have a nice large number there for our company. That's mobile broadband and everything else. Then there are two more lines here, lines 11 and 12, which are basically in case we ever need them. At present, we don't know of anything that would be entered in lines 11 and 12. These are others. If at some point we find services that for some reason or another should be reported but are not reported above, they would go here. In most cases, this is going to be blank. But again, you have to enter at least a 0. You can't leave a line blank. And finally, uncollectibles related to cellular service. They have a randomly low number there. Then there are a couple of questions. The first one is line 1. You have to explain how you are going to split your bundled revenues. In this case, we use the frequently asked questions / instruction manual option 1, which if it's more than 80% allocate it, and 100% to whichever, in this case, 100% to non-voice. It doesn't have to be a long explanation. It just has to be clear what you did and why. And then in line 12, this is basically if you had reported revenues on line 11 or 12 greater than 0, you'd have to explain what was in there. Since I entered 0, this is actually grayed out. I can't even click on this box. When you're done and you're happy with this, you can click Save and Continue. You can click Save at any point to save your progress so far. In this case, I'm going to hit Save and Continue, and it'll move me ahead to the next section.